I have got apologies from Keith. I did have Martin down here because I thought you weren't going to make it, Martin.
Yeah,
but,
well, it all seems to be working fine
but
at the moment.
Okay. You're okay, so we're great. Another one from Jennifer Allen. She says she loves watching the film, the video, but unfortunately she can't make it, but she'll look forward to watching the video. That's the 3 apologies I've got. As you all know, I hope you all know, I did a video with Bernard, whose dad, Harry, made the Changi Cross. Went quite well, Bernard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Quite pleased with that, Ron.
I enjoyed it, mate. We had a good chat. I think that went quite well, but mainly because I'd met you before. Well, I've met you on email a lot of times, but we had a conversation on video Facebook, a messenger, and from that we put your meeting together, and I thought that worked out quite well. A bit informal. We don't want anything too dramatic, but I thought I've had loads of feedback, Bernard, about it, so it's been very good. So well done, mate. And well done for getting on this morning, Bernard. Come on, say something, Bernard.
I am the expert, Ron.
You can all hear the Welsh accent. Brilliant. I love your accent.
I haven't had any fan mail, Ron.
Oh, well, there's been plenty on there, Bernard. And I must say, Bernard, you sent me your email this morning, or you sent me a message this morning, and that bloody carrier pigeon done it all over my keyboard. I think you've got to get a jet propelled one. That takes too long to reply.
You need to feed it, Ron.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was that. We've got the apologies done. We were talking a couple of meetings ago about certain books. One of the first books I did get, I'll start this off and then you can carry on, but I'll start it off. One of the first books I got was The Knights of Bushido by Lord Russell of Liverpool. That's one of the first ones I got. He wrote it just after the war. It's okay, but it's mainly atrocities. So you don't get much about camp life. He's mainly going on about the atrocities committed, which is okay. But myself, I like to know a little bit about what went on in the camps and the comradeship and, you know, what they ate, what they felt. You don't always want to hear about the blood and guts, if you know what I mean. So, okay, that was okay. So anyone who wants it, that's The Knights of Bushido, Lord Russell. I got that in the 1960s, so that's quite... I don't know if you can still get it, but I should think you can pick up second-hand copies. One book which I did keep in communication with Fred Syker. Okay, I did keep in communication with him, and he wrote. It's only a small book, as you can see. That's not a very big book, but he has got a lot of sketches in it. I'll just find some. He's put loads and loads of sketches in it. It's not a big book, but it's very, very good. And I did have an audio meeting with him. Well, I didn't do the audio meeting, but he sent it to me. That was an audio meeting, and that is, I don't know if I've got it on the internet still, but I'll check on that. That's quite good because it explains about the camps and everything.
Was he a prisoner?
Yes, he was a prisoner, yeah.
Yeah. Are those sketches, were they made in the camp?
I don't think so. I think
Made
he made
afterwards.
these. He made these afterwards. They're quite good sketches, as you can see.
Yeah.
They're quite good. Um,
Can I just interject, Ronnie? Just because Meg Parks is
yeah,
trying to put together an exhibition for 2019
yeah,
in Liverpool,
Liverpool.
called, I think rather cleverly, it's called Art of Survival.
Yeah,
And she's trying to pull together original sketches, pen and ink, watercolor, whatever, um, uh, art pictures, drawings, and so forth for this exhibition.
yeah,
And at the moment, she's putting out an appeal. So if anybody knows of any hidden treasures that, particularly that are in private collections, have never been shown before, Meg would be extremely interested in knowing about it. So with the possibility of putting these on show in 2019 in Liverpool.
yeah. There was Peter. I think of his second name, Thatcher. Peter Thatcher. He's been in touch quite a bit because he's Wisbech, Cambridgeshire, and he did put on during the week some sketches by Wilder,
Hmm.
which did use one of them when I did build the site for the FEPOW community. I did use one as my banner at the top. It's Wilder was a renowned artist, and he does actually do some good sketches. I like his sketches because my dad was at non-product, and yeah.
Have you seen that?
No,
This is a book produced by William's son. Well, actually, no, it's a story told by somebody called Judy and Stuart Dewey, but it's in cooperation with William's son. I'm in email contact with him, and that's how I got this copy of the book. And it's full of sketches that were done.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
non-product, yeah,
And the significance for me is that he was a prisoner at Ubon.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. I've got that sketch. It's a good sketch, that.
And if I can just show you, can I just indulge myself for a minute, Ronnie?
Yeah,
This sketch here is of a Seri Thai resistance fighter who was there at the liberation of the Ubon camp. And William's son, I just forget his name actually, he's got an original photograph of that character that was taken at Ubon with a name, and I'm trying to locate this guy's family in Thailand if they're still there. It's a long process because the records aren't very good, but maybe one day I'll find it. And there's other photographs as well. That's probably a famous one, but that's taken inside the Ubon camp as well. And there's another one. He's done a portrait of Fergus Ancorn, and Fergus was prisoner at Ubon, which is rather good as well. So that's worth getting. It's still in print, and if anybody wants a copy of it, I can get William's son to send one to you.
I'd love one, please.
Yeah, I'll be in touch with that, Ray.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'd like one if you can, Ray.
Yeah, I'll send an email to him later today, and
please
get that over.
And
Sorry, Ronnie.
Before we go any further, Ray, how's your mum?
Well, for the others who don't know, my mum had a stroke 6 weeks ago, nearly 7 weeks ago now. The good news is she's making slow progress. She's had a chest infection, which has gone. She's had shingles, which has all but cleared up. but the next thing to deal with is she managed to dislocate her hip. So she's 89 years old, and she's going through it. She's making gradual improvements, but she is very poorly, and there's no likelihood of even being considered for discharge until January at the earliest. So she's not in a good way, but she is not getting any worse.
Well, you definitely look happier today.
Well, I'm trying to. It's only because we had a meeting with the doctors on Thursday, and they confirmed what we thought, is that she is very poorly and there's no likelihood of her coming out of hospital anytime soon. But they reassured us that she is responding, and that we just have to take each day as it comes.
Yeah.
But thanks for asking, Ronnie. I appreciate that.
No, that's yeah. Anyway, we'll just. I don't know if any of you do read stories about Singapore. I've read a couple by Noel Barber.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read any. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. She gets the Chinese life down to a T. Really brilliant. And that one. Yes, and it's the Twilight. I've got the original, Ray.
Well, I can trump you there, Ronnie, because Noel Barber is the half brother of a very, very good friend of mine.
Oh,
and
they are brilliant books. I mean, her descriptions, Ray, are outstanding. I mean, this one, the other one I've got is Tan Maria. Tan Maria. Can't see it. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Whoops. I can't go because my earphones. No, I can't reach. Yeah. Tan Maria, and it's all about the Chinese in Singapore. It's a Chinese family in Singapore, and what happened to them before Singapore, during the Japanese, and after the Singapore. And it's brilliant. It is really brilliant. It's a very, very good story. So anyone wants to read Noel Barber, I would really recommend it. Terrific. Really is terrific.
Ronnie?
Yeah, go on, Ray.
Noel Barber's brother was Lord Barber, who was Chancellor of the Exchequer under the Edward Heath government.
Oh.
And he's responsible for introducing VAT.
Oh.
That's his claim for fame. But no, Anthony Barber, his name, Tony. And Anthony Barber was a Spitfire pilot in Europe in World War II. And he was flying back from France. I'm not sure where from, but over France. His plane got into difficulties and he had to ditch it. And he was captured as a prisoner of war and held in prison camps in Germany in the Second World War for a couple of years. So that's just another sort of anecdote.
One of our things we did is we went. We used to go in our motorhome, and we went down the east side of Germany. Just after the Russians had left, and funny enough, most of the Germans down the east side talk American English. Well, I can't see how they got that, but they do talk American English. But we also went to Colditz, and Colditz was absolutely brilliant. I mean, you can't imagine, when you look at the camps in Japan and you look at Colditz, I mean, completely different prisoner of war accommodation. And they actually built a glider in the false roof of the prison. And they were going to glide out of the prison on it. When you think about things like that, and then you think about the Japanese prisoner of war camps, it's completely different, completely.
If you want a good book, Ronnie,
Yeah.
I think Ray put me onto this one, and it's SOE Singapore 1939 to 41. I can't remember who it's by. I have a copy upstairs in my library, but the, the descriptions of what's actually happening at the time, you can actually visually smell the burning, hear the bombs falling.
Yeah.
It's so vivid, is the writing, it's unbelievable. And it follows the SOE from the fall of Singapore, from the evacuation through to Java and one thing and another. And it's a really, really good read.
Yeah.
And
That's what you want to hear, though, David. You want to hear the small things in the camps and the fighting. You don't want to always hear the atrocities. You want to hear the nitty gritty, what happened to each individual.
This was before the camps, you see. This was when Singapore was falling, and the SOE
the fall,
falling
yeah.
back and whatnot,
Yeah.
because my dad was SOE. But unfortunately, I've got books and books and books about what they did. But once they got to the camps, that's it. And I don't know. I mean, I can imagine what happened to him in the camps. And it fortunately survived, whereas a lot of his friends didn't. Some were beheaded, some were, and it was just horrendous. But it's that nitty gritty about what happened to him in the camps, like you say, and I just don't know. When he came home.
Dad, when I was young, Dad wouldn't talk much about it, but when he came to live with us after my mum had died, I did get a lot out of him. And some of the small things he used to tell me were absolutely brilliant. Because all you do is, when you read these books, you tend to pick up the beheadings and how they were badly treated, but you don't really pick up the small things. And I was reading during last week, a book I got, and it was okay. It was 100 something or other. The car, that was okay, but that was about an officer, and that wasn't really about the rank and file. It was really about the officer. And some officers' books you read are really terrific. But one thing jumped out of this book. I did put a piece of it on Facebook. But one thing jumped out of the book, and after the war, after the railway was finished at Chonkai, they actually did have a lot of concerts and international football matches. And I think I've told you before, my dad played for England in those matches because he played centre half. And that jumped off the page. Of course, they beat Scotland 2-1, and my dad was in that match. and that was absolutely brilliant. Just one little thing in the whole book that jumped off the page to me. The rest of the book, to be honest, I didn't really enjoy because I like to read about what actually happened in the camps, the workload, how they fed and all that type of stuff. I want to hear about that. I don't want to hear about the officers' side. Now, no disrespect to the officers, but there were some good officers who got in line with the men and they helped the men, and there's other officers who looked after themselves. And
absolutely.
And that type of officer I don't want to know about. I want to know about the officer who put himself out for the men, who got a clout because he stuck up for the men. That's the kind of officer that, in my book, was a good officer. But another book...
I totally agree, actually, because a lot of the books that we read are written by officers or people who were able to record a lot of information and so forth. And I seem to find that the best descriptions of life in the camps come from the private's diary or a corporal's diary. And I've mentioned this before, by searching through local archives, the county archives in the UK, there's some terrific accounts written in those archives. For example, when I first started researching the steps of my grandfather, I knew he went to Thailand from Singapore on the 17th of October, which was one of the Bukit Timah parties. So he came from the golf course and worked on the shrine at out there. And so I started to piece together a train roll, basically by going through all the rolls and putting together all the guys that travelled on that particular train, and then searching if they had diaries and so forth. And there was two guys who were from the Suffolks, because that particular train was predominantly 4th and 5th Suffolks, with Lieutenant Colonel Baker was in command, and there was about 64 of the Beds and Herts on that train. So what I discovered was, through the archives, the local archives at Bury St Edmunds, was that there was actually a part-written diary by a private who actually died on the railway, but he'd kept his obviously his fellow prisoners had kept his belongings, and inside his belongings were these drafts and manuscripts that he'd kept notes day by day and dated it. And of course they've been typed up, and they're at Bury St Edmunds. But it's fascinating to read the story of a guy who actually didn't come home. And it goes up until about February 1943, of course, is when he died. But anyway, it just going through the time, just by looking at the timeline and following through events, it's fantastic to transpose that back into your research and what you're looking for. Of course, the other fantastic diary is Captain De Quincey's diary.
The phone ringing. Sorry, Martin.
No worries. Captain De Quincey's diary, 4th Suffolks. His diary is absolutely superb. And you talk about camp life and movements on the railway. It's just extremely descriptive of the railway battalions in Group 2. We know dates when they were moving between camp to camp, and obviously
Did you get a copy of this?
Place.
Did you get a
I
copy?
do have
of
a.
it? Oh,
Yeah,
please.
I've got
Can you send it over to me?
I've got a photographed copy of it. I haven't got it. I haven't transcribed it, which I'm working on, and I'm going to do.
If you want to, I can add it to. If it's a good diary, that can be added to Far Eastern Heroes.
It's one of the fantastic things about that particular diary is that I've also got a copy of Corporal Allen's diary of the Beds and Herts, and when you actually put them side by side and you work through the timeline, you can actually see the crossover, and it just fits beautifully. You know, the dates that he says that, you know, that the Cambridges in 5 Battalion were here and moving here. The other diary just corresponds with it exactly the same. And then when there's an aeroplane and an air raid siren, you know, that sounded at the camp, the other diary is telling you the same type of story. You know, it's really good information. And there's another diary too, and I can't remember the officer's name now. It's James. John Pollock actually sent me a copy of it some time ago, and it's an officer's account. And again, if you follow that timeline, everything just in sequence just fits and fits and fits. So from these diaries, what I've been working on, and it's going to be quite a long project, is I'm actually starting to map out each railway battalion and what camps they were at and what dates they moved and progressively worked up to Tarkanoon, and then further on up to Swinton's and Dobbs Camp and Johnson's Camp further up close to the end of Group 2's area. So it's really valuable to, like I say, it's really valuable to seek out some of these handwritten diaries that are sitting out there in some of these archives, because the information is just incredible. It's just.
I was during the week. I was doing. Somebody asked me a question about the British Battalion, and I was trying to find in my database system, which I did that one a long time ago, and I was trying to find the database I had of the British battalion, you know, who were the Surreys and the Leicestershires. And I was trying to find it, and I actually came across the Beds and Herts I'd done, and I'd put it in with the British battalion for some reason or other.
Oh, right.
So I reckon you've got that though. It's all the deaths from Beds and Herts. I should think you've got that. But I did come across. Now I was going to say to you, did you want it? But I took it you had it. But that's peculiar. My filing system is not brilliant. Sometimes I do make errors. But anyway, I was. Thanks, Martin. I was just going to mention this one because it's all about Wild, you know, and I was talking about Wild a couple of meetings ago. Wild was prosecutor at the war crimes trials, and he got killed during the trials, and so he got killed during the trials. And the main thing is the Americans didn't want the trials to continue. They wanted world trade to get back to normal, but Wild insisted that he was going to take these to trial. But anyway, he got killed. And as I said to you before, that Arthur Lane had a bee in his bonnet, that Wild was killed by the Americans to keep him quiet. Now that is Arthur's book. Arthur, I got on okay with Arthur. He did the Nessa site, and I did do it for him for a while, so I did run the Nessa site for him. But he was okay, but when he got a bee in his bonnet about something, he wouldn't look at both sides. That was it. Boom, 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 boom. So we went along those lines. It's good to read some of his stuff. He called himself the boogler to the dead because he used to play the boogle at the burials in Thailand. So he called himself the boogler to the dead. Some of his books are quite good. He wrote about 10, I think. I've got quite a few of them. Some of them are quite good, but as I say, you've got to take some of it with a pinch of salt, because when he gets something in his head, he sticks to it. He doesn't look at both sides. That's it. Boom, boom, boom. Off he goes.
It's 10:30.
Sorry, chaps. That's my computer telling me what time it is.
Afraid I'm going to have to go in a minute, chaps. My daughter's moving house today, so I'm in the process of helping my daughter move house, so I'm going to have to dash shortly.
Yeah, right, Dave. We'll understand if you go. And another book which I think Keith brought up was about an escape from Thailand. Now, I think that's the book he brought up, A Fearful Freedom by Robert Hammond. Robert Hammond wasn't the one who escaped. It was Jim Wright. Jim Wright escaped, and it's all about his story. I'll have to read it again because, to be honest, I can't remember. I read that a long time ago. And as I'm getting older, my memory is getting worse and worse. I put a book down and I've forgotten half of it. Sometimes I just write it down on the internet so I don't forget. I did start going in, because, you know, I wrote the Death Railway pages, or the Thailand-Burma Railway. I wrote those quite a while ago, and I do now and again, when I read a piece, I do add it in there. So I add it in there and put what book it came from. And so I add it into the camp, mainly because, to be honest, I'll forget. But they're the books I thought I'd bring up. Bernard, come on, mate. We haven't heard from you.
Well, I was going to say something, Ron.
Go on then.
You're talking about now the Singapore and all that. Now, as you know, I don't know whether I sent you any photographs at all, but when I finally got my father's belongings, which came back in a blue Red Cross bag, American Red Cross bag, there was quite a number of negatives, film negatives. My father must have had a camera. And I had a friend then who was died since, but he was a photographer, and I took them to him, and he said, "You shouldn't handle these," he said, because it's not doing them any good. So he said, "I'll get them printed for you," and he printed them all on A4. You know, there's a number of them then on one sheet of A4, and I've got, I don't know how many pages of those. Quite a lot of pictures. I've no idea where they are. I know they must be on the journey from Singapore to wherever they went, but how would I get those to you?
I think you've sent most of them to me, Bernard.
Have I?
I think you sent them to me about the year 2000.
Yeah.
Right.
It was quite a while ago, but I have got loads of your pictures.
Yeah, they're on the website, Ronnie.
Yeah, I did. I think you sent them to me ages ago, Bernard. I think that's about the year 2000 when you just found the negatives.
Yeah,
and I put them all in a folder. I was trying to find it, but I can't remember. I think it's under Religion Changi. Just a minute, I'll try and find it.
There's a lot of them, and they're sort of huts, aren't they?
Yeah. Just a minute, I'll see if I can find them.
Yeah.
You talk between yourselves. I'll try and find them.
I'm afraid
Yeah,
I'm going to have to go, chaps, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, Dave, nice to see you, and nice to see your face.
I'll see you at the next meeting, lads.
Yeah, thanks a lot,
Okay,
Dave.
see you later.
See you
Okay,
later.
David. See you
Bye.
soon. Take care.
See you, Ray.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, Bernard.
Yes.
I was looking at. I was actually looking at that I watched your video with Ronnie there last night, and I had a look on the Roll of Honor, and there's actually a link from the Roll of Honor to the site on Ronnie's website with them pictures on.
Is there?
Yes. If you go to
He
the
didn't
Roll of
something
Honor,
right then. I said he did something right then.
Yeah, yeah. There was the pictures of the church with the crossing and all that. There's quite a few pictures on there.
No, that is St. George's Church, Changi, that is.
Yes.
I believe I'm the only one that's got a photograph of that. You could see that, could you?
Yes, you could see them all. You'll see it, Ronnie. If you go, it's on the Roll of Honor, and then
Yeah. You see, I lost my mother and my father. My father in the war, but my mother died whilst he was a prisoner of war. And my grandmother brought us up, two of us anyway. And you are wrong. Anyway, I didn't have a very nice step-grandfather. And he gave all these belongings, my father's belongings, to my sister. And I didn't really get hold of them until about 2001. And by then, the story had broken, and I realized what they were. Anyway, you can see them there, can't you?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, they're brilliant pictures.
Yeah.
We didn't know at the time where they were, but you sent them all to me, and I had a good look through them. I used some of them on the website, so some of them are on there for people to look at. I did include some you got. There's Bernard, handling the cross. Yeah.
I was a good-looking fella then.
Yeah, that's how to get to the Changi Chapel. some of these, I've just put it on, so it's going through my folder at the moment. That's the chapel. And
That's
you can
right.
see the Changi Cross.
Yeah.
Yeah, Changi Cross. But this was all about the year 2000, Bernard, when
That's
we
right.
when we first started talking.
That's the new Changi Chapel, you see.
Yeah,
I went to the old one first.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you see the cross, though.
Yes. I see that quite often on the internet.
Yeah, that is getting about now. I mean, it's, I think when I look up some of my pictures, because somebody sent me some pictures that I hadn't seen before, and this was about 2001 or thereabouts, of the 18th Division on the way, taken from an aircraft, on the way to Singapore. And he said he held a copyright. He said, you can use them, but they are my copyright, which fair enough, I put on the page. But now they're all over the place. So somebody's copied them off the page and using them.
These are mine. These are mine, Rob.
Yeah, these are yours, yeah. And you hold the copyright to them?
No, I haven't got copyright.
No, but they are yours, Bernard.
They are mine, yes. I got the negatives of those.
Yeah. But no, that's, I'll stop it there, but that you can see I've included, I have got loads of your pictures, Bernard.
Well, I'm glad you've got them. Yes, right.
I'll stop
You can
sharing
use them
that now.
You can use them anytime.
Yeah, well, that's a good story, and I mean, Louise has been on. Louise has sent me a couple of emails saying she's watched the video. Louise Reynolds was Louise Cordenly's daughter, and Eric Cordenly was the one in white. Now, I don't know what it's called. His frock, is it a frock?
No.
She wears the white. But anyway, you called it a dress, Bernard. But anyway, that went.
It's not a Cossack, is it?
I could just picture you getting off the plane in your Welsh overcoat in Singapore. Oh dear.
Let me tell you, Ron, I'd never flown in my life before,
No.
and that we actually left here at Cardiff, went to Amsterdam from Cardiff, and then caught a flight then to Singapore, and I was 17 hours. I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, when I had the shop, there was a TV display at Birmingham, and I used to work for a chap who's now died, Roy Snellen. When I finished my apprenticeship, I went to work for him, and he invited me, and he said you can bring somebody else to go on the plane to see to Birmingham to see the show. So I asked my dad if he wanted to go, and he was flown from Saigon to Bangkok, and then from Bangkok to Rangoon on Liberation. And the first flight to take off crashed and killed everyone on board. That was mainly the sick. So one of the chaps he knew on board was 4th Norfolk's, and Mr. Farrow, and he told me about this, and I said to him, would you like to come on the plane? He said, I won't go on a plane again. So I talked him into it, and we caught the plane from Norwich. And as we went down the runway, there's a crashed plane on the right-hand side. And, oh dear! He said he didn't want to go on a plane because he didn't like them because they crashed. There's a flipping crashed plane there, and we were taken off from Norwich. Oh dear! But no, yeah, that was a instant, because I used to go in an old bookshop in Yarmouth, And Mr. Farrow, who owned it, I used to talk to him a lot because I did used to write. I have got a site on there, Great Yarmouth, gtyarmouth.co.uk, which was one of my first sites, and that is all about Yarmouth because I used to write history on Yarmouth, and I used to go in there and get some books on Yarmouth. And we got talking because he said, "What are you doing now?" So I said, "Well, I thought I'd just have a look through your war books to see if there's anything on POWs." And he said, "Oh, my brother was a POW." And we got talking about it, and he was 4th Norfolks, mentioned it to my dad, and he said, well, unfortunately, he was one of the first out. He was sick, and he was on the first plane out, and it crashed, and they were all killed. Of course, Mr. Farrow didn't know this. He knew his brother died, but he didn't know how. And before I got all the stuff off and wrote it all out for him, and he died before I could give it to him. So he never did know what happened to his brother. But you know, that's one of those things you think about and you think, oh, you'd like to know what happened to them. You know, even the people that get in touch with me and say my father was executed. Oh, come on. You know, they read things and they think everyone was executed. You know, there's quite a few executed, but not everyone. And the same thing happens with Hong Kong. And I talked to Tony about this, Tony Banham, and I get emails from people saying my father was on the Lisbon Maru. He ended up in Japan. Can you tell me? And when you look into it, he weren't even on the Lisbon Maru. It's just because the Lisbon Maru sticks out, because everyone think that's the only boat that went from Hong Kong. Well, there's 5. There weren't just one. There was 5 boats from Hong Kong. So, you know, you can't go by what everyone thinks and writes to you. So I try and start a fresh age. When somebody writes and say blah blah blah, I get on, find my past, and I go through everything, find everything I can, and then it starts to make sense. But people do get one thing on their mind, and they read one thing. I had one during the week. I did one during the week, and the lady wrote to me and said, "Can you put my father on the roll of honour? He worked on the railway." Now, when I looked into it, he caught the boat to Taiwan 1942, and he never went on the railway. You know, people get a little bit, and they think everyone went on the railway, you know, on the Thailand-Burma Railway, but he was actually in Taiwan, so he didn't actually go on the railway. It's funny how people just find a little bit of information and then jump on it. But anyway, I've talked too much. Come on, Martin. Take over, mate. I'm going to go and have some Beecham's. You take over for a little while. I just want to go and get some tablets. My head is killing me.
Talking of books,
Carry on, mate.
the postman has just brought this one for me.
Just now. I'll
that
the
one?
earplugs out.
It's about the Royal Thai Air Force from its origins, including First World War and obviously the Second World War. So that very you know, it's as you know, my research is on the sort of the background to a lot of prisoners of war, and Ubon in particular, and Ubon had a Royal Thai Air Force base, which was used by the Japanese at the time the prisoner of war camp was constructed there in 1945. So there's a lot of overlap between the airstrip that the prisoners were building and the just about 11 kilometres down the road where the Royal Thai Air Force were. So I'm trying to get a bit of background into how the Royal Thai Air Force occupied Ubon and what they did. And the postman's just delivered this book, which hopefully has a few answers to that question. History of Aviation in Thailand.
I'll just let you carry on talking, Ray. I just want to go and get some tablets.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Martin. I stole your thunder again.
That's all good. That's all good. Yeah, other than researching books, another valuable resource I've been looking at is the recordings at the Imperial War Museum of returned POWs, and a lot of those recordings were done through 1980s and into the 1990s, and so a lot of the information was still quite fresh for them, because obviously today we're talking 70 odd years down the track, but a lot of those recordings were done 30 and 40 years after the event, and I think some of those memories were a lot fresher at that time. One particular one, because one of the problems with the archives at Imperial War Museum is that there's lots online, but there's also some that you actually have to purchase. And of course, all the ones that I was interested in, I actually had to purchase. So they charge about £10 per reel. So I bought 7 reels of Corporal Philip Meninsky, who was one of the POW artists on the railway, and his story is absolutely fascinating. And to listen to his story is like actually listening to a talking book. It's half an hour per reel, 7 reels. So obviously there's a fair bit of information that he puts across. And he starts out and talks about his life and how he was enlisted and where he was enlisted and so forth, and then obviously joining up with the 80th Division and the Beds and Hearts and coming out to Singapore. And his descriptions of the events that actually take place is quite fascinating. The detail that he goes into really brings out lifelike events. So they're really worth listening to. There's a lot of chaps who've done recordings that you can actually just access. You just got to go into the Imperial War Museum and go into the I can't remember what the section is now, but it's where the recordings are stored, and you can go through sort of various searches and bring up different chaps and different units and divisions and so forth, and there's a lot you can actually access. With Meninsky, he was quite interesting also in that he would describe a camp quite detailed. He did a lot of description around Tamawang and Nakhon Pathom and Chiang Kai, for example, and Tarsao, because he was at Tarsao for quite some time, and he was also involved in 136 Force at the end of the war. He went to Rangoon, and whilst he was at Rangoon, because he was one of the artists on the railway, he was asked to stay behind in Rangoon with the George Old, who was also an artist in the Sherwood Foresters, who sadly died soon after returning home through his illnesses and so forth. But his descriptions were that they were employed in Rangoon about 6 hours a day to do drawings for the war crimes tribunals, and they were continually drawing emaciated men and ulcerated legs and bits and pieces, which he said subsequently, he said, I drew about 30, 40 drawings. He says, but where they are today, he says, don't know. He says, I've never saw them again. The officials took them away for the war trials, and he never saw them again. But he also did talk about some of the other drawings that he did when he was at Chiang Kai, because he was at Chiang Kai, then he got transferred to Tamawang, and then he was with Major Moon, the Australian surgeon, and Weary Dunlop, and he said Major Moon actually employed me as a orderly, because he knew that he had these talents to draw the condition, like the ulcers and so forth. Because one of the things he pointed out was that a photograph didn't actually give you a good account of what the condition of the ulcer was, because it was a black and white photograph and negative and so forth. He said, so by doing it in watercolour, he said, I could actually just really, show exactly what it was like through the varying stages. So he's saying that he would draw it in its initial stage, and then when it was being dressed and redressed, he would draw it again, and then as it was healing, he would draw it again. And so there was the different, the varying stages. So he said, well, really, he said, Major Boone actually probably saved my life to a great extent. He said, because he said I never had to go out on any working parties from that point onwards, because I was, he said I was employed as an orderly, but never actually worked as an orderly. Spent all my time, preparing all these drawings. So his descriptions were was fantastic. To listen from reel to reel to reel, because he talked his way through Singapore, Battle of Singapore, captivity in Singapore, and then obviously transportation up to Thailand, working in the camps in Thailand, and then becoming involved with working with the surgeons, and one of the reasons he said a lot of the drawings that the artist did manage to save was because they handed them over to all the medical authorities in the camps, and they held them until after the war, of course, and then they were preserved. But anyone who tried to keep their own drawings, obviously, if they were found, they were taken away and they were destroyed. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, Martin, one of the books I was reading last week, there's a description of an ulcer, and the description was, oh dear. The ulcer went from the ankle to top of the shin bone, and the bone was seen all the way down.
Yes,
and they
horrific.
had to take the
Absolutely
leg off.
horrific.
They had to take the leg off. Honestly, some of the ulcers, Dad had ulcers on his legs, but they weren't. I mean, they were really like big scars. But I mean, when you read some of it about the ulcers and using a spoon to take out the.
Well, another fascinating story that I've learnt by researching and studying the beds and hearts is a fellow called Wally Nind. He was at Tarseo, and he was attacked by an elephant, and he was actually pierced through the left buttocks and back of his leg with the elephant picked him up and tossed him in the air. So he had some horrific wounds to his legs, and they took him into obviously into the hospital area and hospital camp there and patched him up the best they could, and then he was evacuated back down to Chiang Kai and then to Tamawan, and the work the surgeons must have produced and performed to save his life is just incredible, because you imagine an elephant, picking you up with his tusks and throwing you. The wound is going to be horrific, but they patched him up, and and how he never got infected and died from infection is just amazing. So yeah, they produced skin grafts, and they worked on him, and they saved his life. He survived the war and came home.
Yeah, one of the ones I was writing during the week. He was in Malaya. He got shot in the knees, and he was on the ground, and chap picked him up. One of his mates picked him up and put him in a lorry. He was taken to Alexandra Hospital, and he was in the ward, and for some reason they took him from the ward and they put him in the dining room underneath the table with some others. So there was a film underneath the table. When the Japanese went in, because they went into Alexandra Hospital, when they went in, they took the surgeon out and bayoneted him, but they left the sick underneath the table on the floor. So he did survive. But why? she said she didn't know why they did it, but according to the Japanese, some Indians had fired on them from the hospital. That's why they say they did it. But I mean, to go in and kill patients and bayonet patients, even on the operating table, that's absolutely ridiculous. You know,
absolutely.
you can't make an excuse for that type of thing. You know, hey, if somebody's firing at you, fair enough. You know, but not to go in and kill innocent people who ain't got a rifle. That is absolutely ridiculous.
Do you know the other part of that story is the surgeon was a friend of another chap who's a survivor called Bill Franklin.
Yeah.
You may know Bill Franklin. He's 105 years old, and he's a bit of a pin-up boy for the for FEPOWs. Lovely chap. But Bill was a surgeon with the Royal Army Medical Corps out in Singapore, and after the capture, he was with the surgeon. I can't remember his name at the Alexandra Hospital. They were asked where did they want to go to, which hospital. So they didn't know, so they drew straws, and Bill went to another hospital, and the other surgeon went to the Alexander, and unfortunately, as Ronnie said, he was murdered by the Japanese. But Bill survived, and he's still around at 105 years old.
Yeah, that didn't stop there, because I read a nurse's account a few years back now, and the nurses were herded into a hut, and the Japanese, of course, took some of them out, raped them, and then they just took them out and bayoneted them. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, if you've got a red cross on your thing, you're Red Cross. It's you're not really in the war. You're there, you know, to help the injured. You're not there to fight. I think that, of course, there was a lot of atrocities, but the Alexander Hospital that's a horrible account. But you can understand if the Japanese, as they say, somebody fired at them, and they say that it was the Indians. Some Indians fired at them from the hospital. That's really stupid Indians doing it, if that was what happened. But even so, it's another one I read was prisoner couldn't march on, and the Japanese came up with his gun to shoot him.
It's 11 hours.
And one of the prisoners said, you know, give me the rifle, and he actually shot him. He said you couldn't trust the Japanese to kill them, so he actually shot his fellow prisoner. When you look at it, okay, the prisoner was going to die in any rate. He did that was a good thing in a way. I mean, now we'd say it was murder, but he did the right thing in a quick death, because otherwise the prisoner, you know, might have laid in the jungle injured for ages. But anyway, that's some things do annoy, don't they? You look at something, you think, oh, you know, that shouldn't really happen. I said to my dad in the 60s, when he gave me his diary to read, I said to him, you know, I just couldn't kill anyone, Dad. He said, you'd have got a white feather. I said, well, no, Dad, I'd have carried a stretcher, but I couldn't shoot from a rifle. I couldn't kill anyone. It's just in my makeup. I just can't think that way. But I said I did. I think I've told you before. I said to my dad, "How many Japanese do you think you killed?" Because he was on the Bren gun, and he said, "I fired my Bren gun and pulled the trigger. I don't want to know who I killed." And really, when you've got to put yourself in their position. Both sides are thinking, well, they've got family at home, they've got a wife, they've got children. You know, you're not just killing one man, you're killing the whole family. The same as Bernard. That was honestly, Bernard, that bit about your dad dying on the way home, and your mother had already died, so you didn't have a parent, but your nan stepped in and brought two of you up. The other one went to live in England. But that really was tearful, because that is horrible. The three of you split up because you had no parents after the war. That is sad, very sad.
That's right.
Yeah. So it didn't end with the death of a person. You've got to look through it and think, you know, the family did suffer as well, right the way through. Yes. Honestly, Bernard, that really did. That hit home, that bit. Because luckily my dad did make it home.
That's right.
So I
You
did.
know, my father mentions a lot in this notebook that he was carrying around with him, that whilst he was in Singapore, he was in and out of Roberts Hospital. And somebody sent me a drawing. Well, it's a water painting. It is of the inside of this Roberts Hospital. And when I went to Singapore, I went on a tour, and the guide took us into a place where the Air Force was. We had to give him our passports to go in there. But anyway, we went into this room, and I looked at it, and I actually took the water painting with me, and I looked at the room, and I looked at the painting, and I said to the guide, I said, "Is this Roberts Hospital?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "I've got it here." Showed him there. Strange, wasn't it? And I said, my father was actually in this room. This was Roberts Hospital.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, but when the pictures you had of the church, you could see the mosque bit.
Yes.
You could see the mosque bit in the walls, the arches and everything. You could see that was built as a mosque. And Louise said that they had to get permission to change it from a mosque into a church. So they had to get actual permission to do that. So that's where your dad's cross was, in that church, in that mosque church.
Yes.
I've actually got the hospital records for Roberts Hospital, so I'll have a look when I go back up to Perth and see if I can track him down.
That's you, Bernard. Yeah. Kevin, come on, you're not going to sit there and don't say a word.
Well, actually, I feel a bit out of it, because I know most of the parents and relatives that you've been talking about all on the Thai-Burma railway, but my father was in actual Palembang.
Yeah. Did he work on the other railway?
No, he wasn't on the other railway. He was in actual Palembang itself.
Ah, yeah.
But what just going back to what Martin was saying about finding diaries and things like that, I couldn't understand how my father had got from Singapore to Palembang, and it was an actual diary written by a man called Eric Diss. It's on your website, and he puts an account on how they rounded up. He was actually in the RAOC, just like Bernard's father, and they rounded up 80 of them, and they said, right, we're going to set up a workshop in Java, and he ended up getting put on a ship called the Pulasugi, and that's his account. It was the only way I could find how my father had actually got from Singapore to Palembang. He actually was sunk in the Bangka Strait, and he ended up in Untok Island first.
Sorry, Martin. Did you read or did you come across an airfield?
Yes,
near there?
Yes, that's there's actually the Americans had targeted that as a like a prime target, the bomb, and there's a American Air Force website. It's got a like a drone of Montauk Airfield.
And did the POWs help
Oh
build
yes,
the strip?
that was
Now,
a film.
yeah, a lady. If you have a look, you go on Facebook, don't you?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. If you have a look on there, a lady was asking me about airfields. Well, no, I think that was on the FEPOW one. She was asking me about airfields, and I told her about a few because I didn't know what she was on about. I think Ray told her about one.
Mm.
Yeah, and I told her about the one at Belaley where the 600 gunner party was. There's one built there. There was one built at on the way, the British Sumatra Battalion on the way from Sumatra to the Burma end of the railway. They built one near Malmeen. But then I'd already done her a page, and I looked up the page I'd done her and had a look, and I'd written on there where that airstrip we were just talking about. I wrote on he worked on that airstrip, and she was asking me about airstrips. I've been there. Honestly, people, you spend ages doing something for them, and they can't even read what you do.
Or they don't understand it. That's
That
sometimes
annoys
what happens.
me. That really annoys me because this particular one, she keeps saying she wants to join our group, and we've written to her. My wife has written to her. I've written to her, and she said the money's in the post. Blah blah blah. This is about 3 months ago, and we still haven't received anything. But she keeps saying she's going to. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't mind, but every time I'm messing around with something like that, I'm not doing anything here. I'm not writing pages, and that annoys me. It really does annoy me. But and that annoyed me so much. I put a bit on. I was fuming at the time. I didn't feel very well, and I put a piece on our Facebook that, because she really did annoy me. I mean, if I'm going to spend ages writing something, I say read it. That's ridiculous. But that's
Excuse me,
why
gents. I'm going to have to sign off, gents. It's,
yeah, I think that's about time we did as well.
dinner time again.
Yeah, I think we'll call it a day. I think it's been okay, everyone. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Bernard, have you enjoyed it?
Very good. Can I say something, Ron?
Yeah, go on then, Bernard.
Since my sister died in June this year, we didn't know much about her family. She wasn't really interested about her father or anything like that. But now I had a letter yesterday from her daughter. There it is there. Now,
Yeah.
I think she's in school, and she wants to know about the family tree.
Yeah.
I thought, well, this is lovely now because I can now share my experiences with her children. But can't make out the email address. It's terrible. I've sent 5 emails and I've had them all back.
Yeah.
And I thought that was lovely. At last, now it's getting home.
Well, this is what I'm finding, Bernard. That used to be a lot.
Chaps, I'm going to have to
yeah,
fly.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Then. See you,
Cheers,
Martin.
guys. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I'm finding this more and more that when we first started this years ago, that was always, we had a lot of FEPOWs involved. So we did have quite a few FEPOWs. And I mean, they really were the backbone of the FEPOW community group. They were brilliant. They used to get in touch quite a bit and tell us stories, and that was brilliant. But then we had the children of the FEPOWs. But now we're getting the grandchildren of the FEPOWs coming through. So it's not just us anymore. It's the grandchildren are coming through. So this is why it's so important we keep these sites going, because it's history, it's what happened to our families, and I'm sure, like Bernard says, the youngsters want to know what actually happened. So I think it's important the sites do get going, and this is why I'm so appreciative of what the members have been doing now in helping me keep the sites going. Because I was quite ill a few years back, and I didn't think I was going to make it. I have to be careful. I can't fly, I can't do this, I can't do that, because blood clots on the lungs. But I get through. I'm breathing, I'm still alive, and while I'm still alive, I'll keep writing. But now, if anything happens to me, you lot are keeping the sites going. So that's one good thing. That's something off my mind, because all that history, all that revision, all that research is going to be kept going, even if I'm not about. And same with Bernard. If we're not about Bernard, that'll still keep going. And I do appreciate it, everyone. I do, with all my heart. That's taken a lot off my plate, because that really did get me depressed at one time, thinking that everything would end and all my research would be lost. The same as you and your research, Bernard. My dad wasn't very religious. He didn't stop me going to church. I was a choir boy. I went to church, and I went through everything. But now I don't go to church. Up here's my church. I don't need to go into church. I can. My favourite place is when we go up North Norfolk. I think I've shown it on the Facebook. I sit there and I can imagine. I can think back. I can think about my dad. I can think about everything. To me, that's as good as going into church. And next year, if any of you want to, if you can make it, we can have a get together there if you want to. I know it's a long way for some of you, but anyone who's near, come and meet me, and we can go and sit on my favourite thing.
We like exploring far-flung places of the compass, Ronnie. So I'm sure we don't need a passport.
we are a bit out on the limb here. I mean,
well, you are, because you talk funny as well.
We talk proper. We've got a proper accent. We're all right. We only eat spuds. No. But honestly, if any of you want to come, I'll put it out to the group. My sister said she'd come. My sister Patsy. She was really ill during the year. She's now got over it. She said she'd like to come. She can't hardly walk, but I'm sure I can get her there. But if anyone,
it's a great idea, Ronnie. It's a good idea. Get a date, and we can work towards it.
Well, I should think we'll look at, say, FEPOW Day near the 15th of August, even if it's one side or the other. If we can do something like that, I'm sure we can all get together and enjoy something. Even if we have a meal somewhere afterwards or something like that, I can organise it. To me, okay, a memorial is nice, but to me, it doesn't mean much. I like my own thoughts. I know I'm strange, but that's the way I am. But anyway, it's been great.
Yeah.
We'll end it there, everyone. Next meeting is the first Sunday of next month. Let me just have a look. First Sunday of next month. Anyone got a calendar?
What's that?
Well, that'll be the 3rd.
3rd of December, yeah.
Yeah, the 3rd, and then the one after that will be the 16th. Okay, 16th of December, just before Christmas, so that'll be nice. What I said to Bernard was, I don't know if you'll all agree, if you want to do it, but at one of these meetings, if we can get everyone to say a happy Christmas to everyone, on screen, and then I can put them all together, edit it, put them all together, and put it out on Facebook. All of you saying Happy Christmas or whatever. If you
Do
want
we have to wear a Santa Claus hat, Ronnie?
you can wear what you like, right? Yes, you can wear a Santa Claus outfit if you wish.
Right.
I don't know what Bernard would wear.
A daffodil in one hand and a leaf in the other would be okay.
Oh, till we end up there. Thanks a lot, everyone. Great
Okay.
meeting everyone, and we'll see you. I'll see you all again next month.
Okay. Okay.
Bye.
Bye now. Bye.